Mark stepped onto his front porch, sipping his morning coffee as the crisp country air filled his lungs. This was it, his dream finally realized. Acres of open land stretched before him, his ranch, his sanctuary away from the suffocating city life. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting golden hues across the wooden fence he had built with his own hands. But the peace, as he would soon find out, was nothing but an illusion. A voice, shrill and uninvited, sliced through the quiet. "I knew it. I just knew this was a mistake." Mark turned, nearly spilling his coffee. There she was, standing at the edge of his property line, Linda, his new neighbor. A middle-aged woman with the type of expression that made you feel like you'd committed a crime just by existing. Her arms were crossed so tightly against her chest, it looked like she was holding herself back from lunging at him. "This land," she said, eyes scanning his property like a hawk eyeing a wounded rabbit, "was supposed to go to someone who understands how to take care of it." Mark blinked. "Excuse me." Linda let out a dramatic sigh, shaking her head. "I mean, look at you. You're new to this. You don't understand what it takes to run a ranch. It's not just about having money to buy land. It's about heritage, knowledge, legacy." She gestured toward her own pristine home sitting atop a slight hill, her lot lined with perfect white fencing. "People like me, we were born into this life." Mark set his coffee cup down on the porch railing, suddenly feeling the weight of what she was implying. He had worked his entire life to get here, saved every penny, endured sleepless nights to make this dream a reality. And now, on his very first morning of peace, this woman, whom he had never met before, was telling him he didn't deserve it? Before he could respond, Linda continued. "It's nothing personal, of course. But ranching isn't something you can just buy your way into. I worry about what your inexperience is going to do to the neighborhood." Mark stared at her, at the audacity dripping from every word. "Linda, right?" he finally said, his voice calm. "Funny thing about land, you don't have to pass a test to own it. You just have to buy it. And I did." Linda let out a short, humorless laugh. "Well, that's exactly the problem. You don't belong here. You don't fit in with the culture. People like me have worked for generations to maintain the quality of this area." Mark clenched his jaw, already knowing where this was going. She was one of those types. People who thought that their mere presence gave them the right to dictate what others could and couldn't do. "Well," he said, keeping his tone even, "I guess you'll just have to get used to me being your neighbor." Linda huffed, turning on her heel. "We'll see," she muttered before stomping back toward her house. Mark watched her go, exhaling slowly. His first morning, and already, he had a self-appointed neighborhood gatekeeper breathing down his neck. He had dealt with difficult people before, but something told him Linda was a different breed of problem. The next few days only proved that theory right. It started small. Mark would wake up to find his deliveries delayed, only to later learn from the supply company that someone had called and informed them that the address was incorrect. Then there was the mysteriously rerouted mail, letters and packages that somehow ended up at Linda's house first, which she would return days later with a smug smile, claiming she was just trying to be helpful. Then came the complaint. Mark was outside installing a new section of fencing when a man from the county office showed up. "We got a report that your fencing violates property guidelines," the man said, looking bored. Mark wiped the sweat from his brow. "From who?" The official hesitated before answering, "A concerned neighbor." Mark didn't need to guess. He sighed. "My fencing is well within regulations." "I figured," the man said, flipping through his clipboard. "But, you know, I have to check when someone files a complaint." Mark let out a humorless chuckle. "And I suppose you'll be getting more of those complaints?" The man shrugged. "Wouldn't be surprised." Sure enough, they kept coming. Reports about imaginary noise violations, accusations that his animals were improperly cared for, even though he didn't even have livestock yet. Each one more ridiculous than the last. Then, one afternoon, the real bombshell dropped. Mark had just finished repairing a section of his barn roof when his phone buzzed with a message from a friend in town. You might want to head to the zoning board's office. Your neighbor is trying to have your land rezoned. Mark's blood ran cold. He jumped into his truck, speeding toward the town hall. By the time he arrived, Linda was already there, speaking in her most persuasive voice to a group of officials. This area is known for its rich history and commitment to proper ranching, she was saying. We simply can't have just anyone coming in and disrupting that balance. I propose a reassessment of the zoning to ensure that land in this district is only used for its intended, traditional purposes. Mark stepped forward, making his presence known. And by traditional purposes, you mean for people you approve of? Linda turned, feigning surprise. Oh, Mark. I didn't see you there. Mark crossed his arms. Cut the act. You're trying to sabotage my ranch. Linda gasped, clutching her chest as if personally wounded. Sabotage? Oh, don't be ridiculous. I'm merely looking out for the integrity of our community. Mark glanced at the board members. Let me get this straight. You want to change the zoning rules just because you don't like who bought the land next to you? Linda straightened her posture. I wouldn't put it so crudely, but yes. We have standards to maintain. One of the officials cleared his throat. Ms. Caldwell, zoning laws aren't based on personal preference. Linda's face twitched, her lips pressing together in frustration. Mark took a step closer. You can't change the fact that I own this land. And you definitely can't change the fact that I'm not going anywhere. For the first time, Linda looked uncertain. She had expected to steamroll over him, expected him to back down. But Mark wasn't about to let her win. As he left the office, an idea began to form. Linda wanted control over everything? Fine. He'd give her something she could never control. It wasn't until later that night, as he looked over the county's property listings, that he found the perfect way to get even. Because as fate would have it, there was an empty lot for sale. And it was right next to Linda's house. Mark sat at his kitchen table, staring at the real estate listing glowing on his laptop screen. The lot next to Linda's house was up for sale. It almost felt like the universe was handing him an opportunity on a silver platter. She had spent weeks trying to push him out, making it her personal mission to prove he didn't belong in the neighborhood. But now, he had a way to turn the tables. If she hated having him as a neighbor on one side, how would she feel if he owned the land on both sides of her? The thought alone made him smirk. He called the real estate agent first thing in the morning. The seller was eager to offload the property, and after a few negotiations, Mark managed to secure it. He kept the entire process under wraps, making sure Linda wouldn't catch wind of what was happening. The last thing he needed was her trying to interfere, and knowing her, she'd find some ridiculous way to stall the sale if she had even the slightest suspicion of his involvement. Days passed, and the deal was finalized. Mark officially owned the lot. The moment he received the confirmation email, he sat back in his chair, exhaling deeply. He could already imagine the look on Linda's face when she found out. But he wasn't going to tell her just yet. No, he wanted her to learn the hard way. Linda, of course, had no idea. In fact, she was practically glowing with excitement that week. Mark saw her outside several times, standing at the edge of her driveway and watching the vacant lot as if waiting for something. He quickly realized she was hoping for a certain type of buyer. Someone she could mold into her ideal neighborhood companion. One afternoon, as Mark was hauling supplies out of his truck, Linda strolled over with a smug expression. I heard the lot next door is getting a buyer soon, she said, her voice dripping with anticipation. I certainly hope it's someone who understands the values of our community. Mark leaned against his truck, trying to suppress his amusement. Oh yeah? What kind of neighbor are you hoping for? Linda beamed. Oh, you know. Someone refined. Someone with a deep appreciation for country living. Not just anyone. Mark nodded slowly. Sounds like you've got a whole wish list. Well, of course, Linda said, laughing lightly. This neighborhood has a reputation to maintain. We can't just let it turn into a free-for-all. Thankfully, I have connections with the local real estate network. I might even meet the buyer myself and offer a few friendly suggestions about how things are done around here. Mark barely held back a grin. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Linda clasped her hands together. Oh, I have a good feeling about this. Whoever it is, I know they'll be a much better fit for the neighborhood. Mark nodded again. I guess we'll see. Linda sauntered away, clearly satisfied with herself. Mark watched her go, shaking his head. The irony of the situation was almost too good. A few days later, Linda's excitement reached new heights. Mark spotted her in her front yard, chatting animatedly with another neighbor. She kept gesturing toward the empty lot, speaking with enthusiasm, as if she were personally responsible for ensuring only the right kind of people moved in. Then came the moment Mark had been waiting for. The official announcement of the sale was posted in the local property records, making it public knowledge. It didn't take long for the news to reach Linda. Mark was outside repairing a section of his fence when he heard it. A sharp, startled gasp followed by a high-pitched shriek. What? He turned just in time to see Linda standing in her driveway, her phone clutched in her hands, her face twisted in disbelief. Her eyes darted wildly between the screen and the vacant lot. Mark set down his tools and casually strolled over. Something wrong, Linda? She snapped her head toward him, her expression a mix of shock and horror. You bought it? Mark shrugged. Yeah. Seemed like a good investment. Linda looked as if her soul had left her body. She opened and closed her mouth several times before managing to speak. But why? Mark crossed his arms. Why not? I figured since I was already your neighbor, it'd be nice to expand a little. Linda's jaw clenched. This is not happening. You can't just own both sides of my house. That's not how this is supposed to work. Mark smirked. Oh, but it is. Linda let out a frustrated noise, gripping her phone so tightly Mark was surprised it didn't shatter. You need to sell it. Immediately. There are people who actually want to buy this land for the right reasons. Mark tilted his head. And what exactly are the right reasons, Linda? She sputtered, struggling to form a coherent response. People who appreciate the values of this neighborhood. People who belong here. Mark's expression darkened slightly. You mean people you approve of? Linda's face burned red. That's not what I meant. Mark nodded slowly. Well, either way, I own it now. And I've got plans. Linda's eyes narrowed. What kind of plans? Mark let the question hang in the air for a moment before grinning. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. Linda took a step forward. Listen, I'm willing to make you an offer. I'll buy the lot from you at a fair price. Mark laughed. Fair price? Let me guess, you'll lowball me and act like you're doing me a favor. Linda's expression twitched. It's better than you wasting the land. Mark rubbed his chin, pretending to consider it. Nah, I think I'll keep it. Linda's nostrils flared. You're doing this just to spite me. Mark raised his hands innocently. Now, Linda, that would be petty. I'm just a guy who enjoys a good investment. Linda muttered something under her breath, then whirled around and stomped back to her house. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. She wasn't going to let this go easily. He had no doubt she'd try every trick in the book to make him change his mind. But what she didn't know was that he had already thought several steps ahead. He had plans for the lot, all right. Plans that were going to drive her absolutely insane. For the next few days, Linda tried everything. She filed complaints, citing imaginary zoning violations. She even attempted to rally a few neighbors to pressure him into selling. None of it worked. Mark had all the paperwork in order, and the few neighbors she managed to rope in weren't exactly eager to fight a losing battle. Then came her final attempt, legal threat. Linda stormed up to his property one afternoon, holding a folder stuffed with papers. I've consulted with an attorney, she declared. I have legal grounds to challenge this sale. Mark raised an eyebrow. Really? On what basis? Linda opened the folder, flipping through pages. There are regulations, codes, that prevent excessive land consolidation in certain areas. Mark crossed his arms. Did you even read those regulations, or did you just hope I wouldn't? Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Mark grinned. I already looked into it. There's nothing stopping me from owning both lots. But hey, nice try. Linda's face turned a deep shade of red. She snapped the folder shut and stormed off. Mark watched her go, shaking his head. The best part was, he hadn't even told her the full extent of his plans yet. That surprise was still to come. Linda was livid. The fact that Mark now owned the lot next to her house had shattered her entire sense of control. She had spent years dictating how things should be in this neighborhood, making sure everything met her impossible standard. Now, her worst nightmare had become reality. She was surrounded by the one person she had tried to push out. Mark had expected her to back down eventually, but he had underestimated just how deep her need for dominance ran. She didn't just want him to sell the land, she wanted him gone entirely. And that meant her tactics were about to escalate to a whole new level. It started with a sudden announcement. Linda had formed an HOA. Mark had laughed out loud when he found the so-called official letter in his mailbox. Printed on cheap paper with a logo she had likely designed herself, the document claimed that all property owners in the area were now part of a newly established homeowners association. It listed a series of mandatory guidelines, including fencing restrictions, lawn maintenance rules, and even a section on proper neighborhood decorum. At the bottom, there was a demand for an annual membership fee. Mark crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash. There was no official HOA in this area, and he knew it. But Linda was clearly hoping he was either too uninformed or too frustrated to fight back. A few hours later, she appeared at his doorstep. I assume you got the notice, she said, arms crossed. Mark leaned against the doorframe. Oh yeah. Real official looking. Linda lifted her chin. It is official. As of this week, the neighborhood is now under the jurisdiction of the Caldwell Homeowners Association. Mark smirked. Caldwell? As in your last name. Linda's eye twitched. Someone had to take responsibility for this community. Mark folded his arms. That's interesting because I checked with the county, and they have no record of a newly registered HOA. That means your little group has no legal authority. Linda's smug expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered. We're still in the process of filing the proper paperwork. Mark nodded slowly. Well, let me know when you get that sorted out. Linda's smile thinned. You can either comply with the guidelines or prepare to deal with the consequences. Mark raised an eyebrow. Consequences? Linda let out a fake laugh. Oh, don't be so dramatic. I just mean that non-compliance comes with certain challenges. Mark tilted his head. Like? Linda waved a hand. Oh, you know. Complaints, reports, official notices, the sort of things that make life difficult for people who refuse to be team players. Mark grinned. You mean harassment? Linda's smile froze in place. Mark chuckled. Listen, Linda, I don't answer to you. And I sure as hell don't answer to a fake HOA. Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. You'll regret this. She turned on her heel and marched back to her house. Mark sighed. She was getting desperate, which meant things were only going to get messier. Sure enough, the next few weeks were pure chaos. Linda flooded the county office with complaints, some so ridiculous that even the clerks had trouble keeping a straight face. One report claimed that Mark's property was an eyesore that was lowering the neighborhood's property values. Another accused him of unauthorized agricultural activity because he had a small vegetable garden. None of them stuck. But that didn't stop Linda from trying. Then came the zoning complaint. Linda had somehow convinced a city inspector to visit Mark's property, claiming he was violating land use regulations. But Mark had already done his homework, and when the inspector arrived, he had every document ready. Looks like you're in perfect compliance, the inspector had said, shaking his head. Not sure why I was even called out here. Mark had just smiled. I have a pretty good idea. The real breaking point, however, came when Linda realized she couldn't force him out legally. That was when Mark decided it was time for the final move. For weeks, he had been planning the perfect way to get under Linda's skin. Buying the lot next to her house had been satisfying, but now, he wanted to make sure she understood that she couldn't control everything. One morning, construction crews arrived at the empty lot. Linda, who had been watching his property like a hawk, came storming over the second she saw them unloading materials. "What is going on?" she demanded. Mark smiled. "Oh, just getting started on a little project." Linda's eyes narrowed. "What kind of project?" Mark gestured toward the workers. "I'm turning this lot into a community dog park and barbecue area." Linda went pale. "A what?" Mark pulled a rolled-up blueprint from his back pocket and unrolled it. "See, I figured this town could use a nice open space where people can bring their dogs to run around. And right over here, I'm putting in a barbecue pit and picnic area. You know, for neighborhood gatherings." Linda looked like she might faint. "You can't do that." Mark shrugged. "Sure I can. It's my land." Linda's breathing became rapid. "This is a residential neighborhood. This kind of thing doesn't belong here." Mark smirked. "Oh, I checked with the county. It's totally within the zoning regulations." Linda clutched her head. "You did this on purpose?" Mark grinned. "Oh, absolutely." For the next few weeks, Linda was in full meltdown mode. She filed complaints, tried to rally the neighbors, even attempted to bribe the contractors to stop work. Nothing worked. By the time the dog park and barbecue area were completed, Linda looked like she had aged 10 years. The grand opening was a neighborhood event. People brought their dogs, kids played on the grass, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. Linda, of course, refused to step outside, watching from her window with a look of pure misery. Mark, holding a plate of ribs, made sure to give her a friendly wave. She lasted exactly 3 months. After endless complaints, sleepless nights from barking dogs, and the unbearable reality that she had lost, Linda put her house on the market. Mark watched with amusement as the "For Sale" sign went up. It wasn't long before she packed her things and disappeared, taking her fake HOA and entitled attitude with her. On the day she moved out, Mark sat in his newly built barbecue area, flipping burgers on the grill as neighbors chatted around him. The sun was setting, casting warm hues over the land that was now completely his. Linda's car passed by one last time, her face twisted in bitterness as she glared at the scene before her. Mark lifted his burger in a mock toast and took a big, satisfying bite. Life was good.